first things first. The first things here is the First Peoples, and I just want to acknowledge the Indigenous, the Indigenous brothers and sisters on their beautiful homelands. I know there's history here. I know there's deep history here. I know there's complicated history here. I also know there's history in the making as well. And I would submit to you that's the same thing in this region called the Ring of Fire, right? Like the Ring of Fire is just another mainstream name for a place, you know, that communities have been living there since millennium. You know, just remember that, because this area has deep history. You know, this area has complicated history, you know, and it's also making history, you know, with Indigenous-led environmental assessments. So let's do a quick presentation here for you guys, because it's exciting for those that are involved, exciting for those that are supporting it, and we're excited to share that. So, what is the Northern Road Link? Well, it's a unique historical transformational opportunity for Ontario's far north and the remote regions in Ontario. And that's nothing new for Canada. You know, Canada's always been building infrastructure, you know, towards opportunities. This is no different. You know, it's just that it's Indigenous-led. It's no different than, you know, Sir John A. Macdonald had a vision about building something across Canada. There's no difference here. You know, the idea of two communities having a vision for itself in their own homelands. The proposed road will open up new opportunities. It would open up new challenges, but also open up a new future for its youth and future generations. These roads are led by two Indigenous communities, Martin Falls and First Nations, and they are leading. They are the proponents. What that means is that they are leading the environmental impact assessments. They are leading the engagement consultation requirements. They are leading the negotiations, you know, for the ownership and governance of this critical infrastructure into Ontario's far north. In other words, these two communities, these two leaders here, are actually leaders, as the word actually implies. Leaders with a vision, leaders with a pathway, leaders with negotiated commitments. And part of that negotiated commitments, of course, is Ontario. There are $1 billion that they committed to the roads. So where are these roads to self-determination? You got to think about that when you hear about, you know, Indigenous aspirations, right? What's implied there? Indigenous aspirations. What's Indigenous autonomy? Or what's implied in Indigenous autonomy, right? Indigenous agency. And what these communities want is not to be victims of development, but actually become agents of development. And that's key here. And that's what, you know, we're kind of figure out some road to self-determination. That's what it's implied. It's located in a remote region. What's key here is that we're talking about the roads. We're not talking about the mines. We're not talking about mineral exploration. We're talking about roads. The roads being led by these two First Nations. I want to make that clear. Right? You know, when we're talking about environmental impact assessments in the Ring of Fire, it's actually about the roads. It's the only environmental impact assessments that are live today in the Ring of Fire. So where and what are these roads? There's actually three roads. Webequie Supply Road, which is the red, and that purpose of that road is actually to move people, materials and supplies from its airport, the remote airport, to the proposed mine site as well as exploration activities. The other road is the purple, the Martin Falls Community Access Road, the operative road being access. They want to have access to the provincial highway. So it's community access. The middle road is what we're talking about today, is the Northern Road Link. And that purpose is very clear. It's actually an industrial road for the Ring of Fire developments. So it implicates the economic development road as well as the access road in terms of its purpose. It's going to connect the two around to the highway. Excuse me. And all these three roads are actually going under the provincial environmental assessment as well as the federal impact assessment. So it's probably the most robust set of studies ever been done in that area, ever, in that region. Yeah, I'm not going to sell you, I guess, the upside of being road connected. But I will invite you to try to gain some, if you have an opportunity, to gain some experiential reference point of what life is like in a remote community, and how challenging it is for remote communities to try to improve its quality of life as a remote community. But believe it or not, these two communities want the same things you want the same things that you have, right? Good health care for its elders, good education for its youth, good jobs, for its members. Exact same thing, and that's what this road represents to them. The environmental impact study. So there's three main reasons why they're leading the environmental impact assessment. Number one reason, right, is to generate information. To make informed decisions. You talk about UNDRIP and FPIC. What do you think they're doing this for? To understand the landscape and all the natural science studies that has to, all the social science studies that has to happen, so they can generate information, what the baseline is, what if you put a road on there, what's going to happen. So you do the study, you lead it, and what better way for Indigenous communities to lead it, to include its Indigenous principles with the provincial principles and the federal principles, and actually design something that aligns with their values, and what they want to do around these things. So they want to, I'll say it again, because it's the main point, why they're doing this, is to generate information to make informed decisions. Number two, the proposed road link is actually on the Northern Road Lake Road is actually on the traditional territories of Webequie and Martin Falls. It literally is. If you got the community-based land use planning, you could download it on the Ministry of Natural Resources website in Ontario. You can see their community-based land use planning areas that actually, the road's situated right there. Unequivocal. And not only that, but they're actually doing Indigenous knowledge studies, three of them. They're going to have three different reports about their Aboriginal sites of cultural significance, their land utilization patterns, all the ceremonial sites that in that region based for these studies. So they, because they're the closest to any proposed development. That includes the roads. That's why, that's number two. They're the closest. Number three is that because it's their homelands, because they're land users, water users, traditional resource users that hunt, fish, and trap, with their constitutionally protected right that they're exercising, there's no other group in Canada that's going to protect their own homelands. It's like having your backyard. Like, you're going to protect your backyard way more than anybody else. That's number three. That's the main third reasons why they're embarking on this environmental, why they're leading it. Oops. So we are very, very grateful in Ontario's belief in these two communities, Ontario's belief in their leadership, Ontario's belief in their capacity to do this, right? Like this, these are $20, $30 million worth of studies that they're project managing right now. Each project. And that takes belief. You know, for me to cut you a check, hey, go study. Have you ever done it before? No. Don't worry. You know, we'll make sure there's supports there for you. So, so there's a deep appreciation for Ontario, for believing in there. The other thing is that we hope the provincial and federal government actually come together to make a plan for these two communities and the future reality for their kids. And we also hope that the federal government, you know, actually steps up, you know, and match the $1 billion that Ontario has committed to, and as part of strategic investments based on all their priorities, economic reconciliation, right? The critical minerals strategy, you know, and trying to create jobs and made in Canada, made by Indigenous, you know, that kind of stuff. So we're hoping for federal support, you know, federal investments, you know, and federal partnerships going forward with these projects. Miigwech.
Thank you all so much for your time. I'm really excited to talk about this fascinating project. I would like to start first with Chief Wabas, and then we'll go to Councillor Munias. I have a similar question to kick things off for both of you, which is just how transformational will this project be for your community?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here today. I mean, for us in the remote area, it's going to be you know, an experience for us to see you know, transition in our communities, where you know, we're planning you know, a road to our community. So there is going to be a lot of challenges, lots of you know, work that we need to do, you know, to address those challenges that we may have as a transition in our community.
Councillor Munias, what about your community?
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. My name is Robert Munias, a councillor for Martin Falls First Nation. I'd like to do a land acknowledgement to the Algonquin territory that I'm sitting in today. Miigwech for the good morning remarks. Also, Chief Bruce Hatznipaneshkim was unavailable for this event, so he sent me. He's on other prior commitments in Thunder Bay with meetings. Thank you very much. To your question on how our community would benefit or transform, I think is what you said. Our community is a small community. We have a large population that live off reserve, and we try to get people back home with the road, with the Martin Falls Community Access Road. If we build that, then that'll change a lot for our community in terms of economics and infrastructure, housing. You know, that's the big thing right now in Canada. We talk about housing not only in the Indigenous community but all across Canada. That's what I hear is housing shortages. That's because we're maxed out as to where we can build, and we need those infrastructures to build our community. And when we do that, we get materials. We usually fly them in, and that costs a lot of money. Then we have our winter road, and that itself is a challenge with you know, our winter roads. Sometimes it's warm, and this year we had lots and lots of snow, and that's a challenge in itself, trying to maintain that road so we can get our supplies coming in. So it's a big thing for you kind of get the picture of how I explain things, how that would change things, and the cost of living, the cost of food. We don't have a grocery store. We fly in all that stuff. We fly in the groceries, the Pampers for the kids, and all that stuff. We fly it in, and fuel. It's pretty expensive with a limited amount of employment. We have our struggles, and I hope that paints a little bit of a picture anyway, best I can.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be a really transformational project. And so for the minister, I mean, can you tell us a bit about how you came to reach this agreement with these communities to have an Indigenous-led environmental assessment?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I've been the minister for about a year now, and this agreement was reached with the previous Minister of Northern Development Mines and his staff, and it was done on the basis of the recognition that if anything was going to happen, really anywhere in the North, it was an absolute requirement that you'd be involved with the First Nations and the Indigenous people. It was that recognition that this is essential. My background, it's too bad you don't keep the map up a little bit longer, because then you'll realize just what a vast territory Northern Ontario is. And then if you just go above the Highway 11, Highway 17 corridor, you recognize just how the remaining territory is vast. And who's always been there? The First Nations. They've always been on that land. I think there's very few people in this room that would have decided that they're going to have a winter vacation in Martin Falls. Am I right or am I wrong? They've always been there. And it's only, so what we see happening today is a recognition that it's the right thing to do. It's led by the Indigenous people, the First Nations, and that is simply the right thing to do.
And so for Michael, I mean, tell me how you hope, if you do hope, this becomes a model for future impact assessments or environmental assessments. Sorry, do you hope that this Indigenous-led environmental assessment becomes a model for the future for other projects in this province or in this country?
You know, I've seen the evolution. You know, I've been in this space for over 25 years. When I worked in the Aboriginal Financial Institution in Northwestern Ontario, structuring project and financing, and it was Indigenous partnerships, right? Participation, and then it came to the point of, you know, the equity deals, you know, small, then it became large. And so to me, you know, if Indigenous communities are you know, trying to realize their aspiration, and that you know, moving from, you know, the historical practice of economic exclusion to sort of the new pathways for economic inclusion, you know, this is the way. And why it took a little while in the beginning of the environmental assessment was because the regulators, they were open-minded enough, both the federal and provincial, because it was new to them. It was new to them that, you know, trying to integrate the Indigenous principles with the federal principles, with the Ontario's principles, in a way that's going to satisfy, you know, all the regulators, including the Indigenous. So I think there's a trend line in Canada where they're going to be part of it. They're actually going to do it on behalf of the proponent, or they're actually going to lead the undertaking themselves.
It does seem to be moving that way. And I wonder if I could ask the chief, I mean, do you have any advice for governments, you know, provinces, the federal government, or companies that are looking to partner with or support First Nations as they undertake these kinds of development projects?
I think, yeah, for us, for Wildcare First Nation, I think we're looking for good working relationship, and also to make sure that that we are, you know, a party to, you know, what's going to take place in the region, in our region there. So I think it's just a matter of, you know, making sure that we're part of the process from the beginning, you know, and moving forward, and also to understand, you know, the community needs, and make sure that there are some commitments as well too in moving forward, in you know, making sure that that we understand how is it that we need to work together to make sure that all parties benefit from the potential development in our area.
And Councillor, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, just going back to, we've been talking about our road since I can remember, since I was a kid, and our previous chief there, Eli Munias, he was talking about building the road, and that continuing ongoing support from the federal government is what we need, and to move our project along.
So, Minister, I mean, how do you hope that this project helps open up development of the Ring of Fire for critical minerals?
Well, as Michael said, it's an economic road. It's designed to achieve that goal to the benefit of the First Nations that we're talking to today. And the reason for that is because the First Nations themselves want to see that development. They, to the point that they're leading it, as I've said. It's impossible to develop any mineral resources in really any remote area, or any area really, without roads and infrastructure. It absolutely has to happen. But before that can happen, there has to be a willingness to see development. And these two communities want to see that. It's in their traditional territories, as Michael said. They're the ones with the trap lines, and they're the ones that have the belief in their communities. They want to see their communities grow and prosper. They want to see their children healthy, and they want to see their children and grow up to stay in those communities. So it's a desire to improve the communities that they live in. And with the government's role, of course, is to partnership with the First Nations communities that we're talking about, really any First Nations community. But, and that's why we've set the table with the $1 billion. It's not specifically to develop mines. We don't build mines. But what we do is we set the table so that development can help, that can take place. And that $1 billion is essentially to ensure that these communities, when the resources are developed, that the communities will thrive. Roads, capacity building, broadband, hydro lines, so the communities thrive. And that's really the government's responsibility. And it's a significant belief. $1 billion is not a small number. But it speaks to the belief that this government, Premier Ford, has and belief and support of the Indigenous communities in this area.
Michael, in your presentation, you said you hope the federal government steps up. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what you'd like to see from the federal government on this project?
Yes. Well, in the last federal budget, they talked about regulatory efficiency, and I hope that conversation goes forward. And actually, there's real movement around that. I think looking at an Indigenous-led project in the EA and IA coordinated in Ontario, it's still a bit disjointed. And trying to build things in the window of opportunity we have here in Canada will be problematic if that's not looked at. You just look at a map of Canada, with northern roads. Everything was triggered by, northern Quebec, with the big hydro development there with the Crees. Northern Manitoba roads all the way up based on development. So this is not new. All major undertakings, that has federal investments. There's smart economists that can calculate, X amount of dollars will produce X amount, and I think this is no different. Why the reluctance? I guess the federal government just overtly just committing, even notionally, in their budgets. It's not a hard thing to do. It's like, we believe in this. It's led by Indigenous communities. They are the people to to ensure that there's a balance between natural resource protection and natural resource development. I worked with Webakwe for 15 years, and I saw that soul-searching exercise, with the community. So, trying to understand that 15-year history, from Webakwe and Martin Falls protesting the Ring of Fire, now they are the proponents of the roads that will facilitate the development of the Ring of Fire. That's a journey. The reaction in the beginning, they're actually now pushing, to let's make this happen. So that collective journey, mainly with Ontario, I'll be very frank with that, not the federal government, that actually was part of that journey and actually understand, the aspirations of these two communities, but also understand the concerns of the surrounding communities that want the same thing. The James Bay Communities has a road study. They got a feasibility. You can download it on their app. But they also are trying to balance the coastal lines. And I'm from there. I'm from the Hudson Bay. We've got a big provincial park there, Polar Bear Provincial Park. My reserve is right dead center of it. So, these are hard decisions for each communities. And those that are willing, to move forward on these type of major undertakings, I think the federal government should support. They support every other corporation in Canada.
I want to pick up on what you're saying because the federal government has poured some cold water on the idea of Ring of Fire development. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, who's in a neighboring room speaking right now, but he has said that it's a challenging area, in part because of some Indigenous groups' opposition to development of these mineral deposits, as well as some environmental concerns. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, how can we overcome those concerns that the federal government has raised?
I actually don't know what specific federal concerns they have. I mean, they imposed this new Impact Assessment Act, which is pretty rigorous. I don't know, you're trying to compare the provincial and the federal, what's more rigorous? They're both rigorous. The individual EA in Ontario is the most comprehensive EA you can have under the provincial laws. The impact assessment is the most comprehensive impact assessment you can go through, and then coordinate the two. They try to dovetail with all the species at risk, all the biophysical studies you got to do. I'm talking from groundwater, water, vegetation, forest, birds, bats, bunnies, caribou, wolverine. We study it all. And I shared this morning, it's the most extensive and expensive set of studies ever in that region. So the concern, what are we not studying? Seriously. What are we not studying in that area? And so we invite the probably 3 or 4 of the oppositional voices to be part of those, to be part of the dialogue. I would say I would say our record of consultation is so robust and rigorous that we can demonstrate how often we outreach to the 2 or 3. I won't mention them. First Nations that that have deep concerns or outright oppositional to the project. Among the 22 that we have, so there's others that we've been into communities. We were just there a set of them last set of weeks. There's people doing the Indigenous knowledge studies for the project. There's a whole set of other communities participating in the environmental impact assessment. It's just a small subset aligned with environmental NGOs that are making the most noise. And some of them are actually so far away, and that's typically what happens. The most least impacted are the loudest. So that's what I got to say.
So for the minister, I mean, how essential do you think Ring of Fire development is to meeting our goals as we transition in the climate and try to, as the country tries to take hold of this opportunity that critical minerals present?
I'm sorry, did you say settlement?
Ring of Fire development.
Well, obviously, there's an urgency that the region be developed. Obviously, for the communities and all the communities in the area, there's an urgency with what we're doing in the critical minerals sector. That's why we have a critical minerals strategy in place. I want to give you an example, and there's people like Mark Selby that have heard this already, and Kristen Straub have heard me talk about this. But let's just talk about rare earths. And if the Chinese government right now embargoed rare earths, that would stop us in our tracks, because rare earths are required to build the magnets that are used in the electric motors that power the electric vehicles. There are no rare earths mined in North America. There is an urgency that we get the minerals out of the ground so we can achieve our goals, objectives that we all want to achieve, vis-a-vis not only securing the supply chain, the benefit for the communities, but also our climate goals. I will be this bold to say that it took smoke in New York City before the larger body of civilization in North America realized perhaps there's something, maybe perhaps there's something we have to do. We've had that sense of urgency for quite some time. If you want to focus on the mineral potential, let's focus on one metal, nickel. If you want to look at the supply-demand chain graphs for nickel, that's the material that's going to be in critical shortage, and that's the commodity that in that area has the most potential. And you can imagine this provides a generational opportunity for the Indigenous people, the First Nations, to lead the charge to change the economy and our society from those remote communities that can stand up and said, they led the charge. World leaders. And from my point of view, that's a fantastic thing. It's a phenomenal thing. And perhaps it's a first. And for me, it's a real pleasure to be talking about that right now in relation to the fact that it's going to be the First Nations people, the Indigenous people, that will lead the charge in Northern Ontario, Canada, and the globe. I just think it's a tremendous spot to be for my friends right here.
Absolutely. I'm being told to wrap it up, but I want to give the chief and councillor the last word. So I want to ask you both, what will this project, do you hope, mean for future generations in your communities? What do you hope this project will mean for future generations in your communities?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. For our community, we do have a vision, and for our vision to to come to reality, there has to be some processes that we have to do, including working with the government, with industry, and with all that are interested in working with us. So we do have a vision, and we come to realize that the vision is going to be challenging, and we hope that that this vision that we have will come to reality in the near future with working with government, industry, and also all parties. And we hope that all the other First Nations surrounding the potential in the Ring of Fire area will prosper our communities in the near future. Thanks.
And for you, Councillor, what do you hope it will mean for future generations?
Yes, thank you for the question there. Again, like I said before, it's a big project, and it'll help our communities, the surrounding communities, and the First Nations. We want to work with other communities, and it'll change. It'll help our youth in terms of education, housing, all that stuff that I said before. I'm just open to, we're concerned about our environment as well. I go out there, I hunt out there, and we're all concerned. We share those concerns about the environment and the waters. During the studies, I was out there listening to birds 6 o'clock in the morning with the helicopter, what Mike was saying, the cost of going up there to the helicopter, walking on the muskegs, looking for eggs and, that kind of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.